We've got some NFL questions for the writer behind NBC's Football Morning in America. Posted up at Packers Camp, it is our dear friend Peter King. We'll start with this, Peter. The effect of the new helmet rule. Is it going to have a big impact on play, or are people freaking out unnecessarily?
Like me.
Well, I think people should freak out because I think it's probably going to be a debacle. But having said that, I'm in favor of this debacle because the league has to do whatever it can to stem this tide of, you know, this basically this huge tide of parents not letting their kids play football and the numbers going down. So I'm in favor of it, but it's like I spoke to a linesman in the league the other day, Jeff Seaman, who said, listen, we'll probably be better at this in midseason than we are now. This is going to take a lot of getting used to.
How was this thing called Thursday? Were there instances that were borderline or seemed objectionable in the first preseason game?
Well, I think the way it was called is that the officials have basically been told, you know, err on the side of caution. You know, that's what's going on with this new rule. You're going to see it overcalled, I think, in the preseason so that players can get used to the fact that if they lead with their helmet, they're going to get a flag.
Let me pick up Wilbon's point here, because I know this is what he's leading to, because he's a guy who followed the Bears his whole life that have no offense and are just known for defense. In fact, does defense matter anymore, or are we seeing defense legislated out of football?
Well, it's going to be really hard to be a great and fierce defensive player without getting some penalties for leading with your helmet. As I've gone on my training camp trip this summer, I've had guys who are really good football coaches like Dan Quinn basically look me in the eye and say, this is really going to be good for football. It's going to teach proper tackling in every team because anybody who leads with their head, you're not going to be able to play. So I think that part of it is good. But I also think this. All the stories that we always hear about players whose lives are ruined at age 45, 50, 55, and we think it's because they've taken too many hits in the head. I mean, this is why this really should be done, and it should be done right now because we've got to stem the tide of these, long-term, brain trauma injuries.
All right, we'll stay with the theme of defense. Tony referred to my rooting for the Bears my entire life, which is true. Why is my team being so stupidly stubborn about Roquan Smith?
Because I think that some teams draw a line in the sand at specific clauses in contracts, and I think that's what this is about. And I think at some point, Roquan Smith is probably going to have to blink if he wants to be in camp before, I'd say 2 or 3 more weeks. And Michael, here's what's interesting about your Bears. When I went to their camp, I thought that was the most interesting offensive team that in all the years that I've covered the Bears. That's
Really?
The most interesting offensive team I've seen because Mark Helfrich comes in from Oregon, and you got Matt Nagy, who's everything with him is a blank slate. I'm going to do everything. And you have a quarterback who actually ran RPOs, Mitchell Trubisky, while at North Carolina. They are going to be an exciting offense. But right now, obviously, it's being overshadowed by this, this incredibly, in my opinion, ridiculous holdout by Roquan Smith that I think both sides bear blame to.
I'm going to quote you on that line 1,000 times this season when Wilbon wants to bury Trubisky and says he's no good at all.
I want to bury the GM.
All of last year.
I want to bury the GM.
Let me shift over to offense a little bit. The Colts GM, Chris Ballard, and also their new head coach have basically said that Andrew Luck could be better than ever. You've seen him. We were talking for months that he couldn't even throw a regulation football. He was throwing a high school football. What do you see, and are these guys right?
I watched every pass that he threw at Sunday's practice, which was a full, well over 2-hour workout under the sun beating down on him in central Indiana. And what I saw was a guy who I watched his face as much as possible. I never saw him wince. I never saw him do this with his shoulder, nothing. I saw a guy who basically went out there and threw the ball, I thought, close to perfectly. Now, he didn't have a great practice in terms of long completions down the field. But the last throw he made, which I described in my column on Monday, he went to the left And this pass was designed to put maximum torque on his left shoulder where he had the torn labrum surgery. And he threw the ball having to put a lot of torque on that arm. It was a beautiful throw, touchdown pass, 30-something yards to T.Y. Hilton. Talking to him afterwards, I would best describe Andrew Luck as being euphoric. He was as happy as I've ever talked to him. And I think it's because he saw that he almost had football taken away from him.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Peter. It's great to hear
Much
from you.
Appreciate it, man.